More recently, if we go to 77 through 2010, we had 5 recessions during that period. An important thing to look at is here, is the gaps between these recessions. If we go back to 1981. And what that's done to us is it's given us a false sense of security. We went for a long time between recessions. We had some pretty good economic times to live with. And even these recessions, if we look here, the S&L crisis, this is the dot-com bubble, that sector shock recession I was talking about, and compare that to what we're going through right now, looks pretty shallow. This was, again, 1980-81, pretty significant recession on par to what we're going through right now. Part of the reason for this slide is to say these things happen, and they will happen again, but we can recover from them. The critical thing in my mind is that if this is, as I'm saying, a balance sheet recession, we need to look at different ways of coming out of that than during a typical sector shock or an income statement recession. What's the evidence for this? So I'm saying this is a balance sheet recession. The evidence is, if we look back to 1976, this is a borrowing by corporate borrowers over that period of time. So you can look at the dollar amount of borrowing, dip down, 1991, so S&L crisis, dip down again during the period of the dot-com recession. But look what's happened now. This is taking assets off the balance sheet. Only here in the S&L crisis, when we really had banks, we had financial institutions failing, did we see anything even close to what's going on now. This is a significant drop-off. The other side of the equation is what was happening to consumers. Over the same period of time, we see a very steep rise. It peaked in 2006 at $1.1 trillion annually. Consumers were borrowing in the U.S. $1.1 trillion annually. And it's dropped off to now where we get what we're calling delevering. So assets coming off of balance sheets. People reducing debt, reducing liabilities. Critical thing is when you look at these things together in concert, over the 2 previous recessions, we see corporations delevering, households, I don't think we care. Kept right on borrowing. In fact, increased it through the dot-com recession. Consumers were increasing the debt they were taking on. Compared to what was going on right now, we have, at the same time, we have both households and corporations reducing debt. Not just decreasing the amount per year that they're borrowing, but actually reducing the amount of debt that they have. So this is part of the evidence base for a balance sheet recession. But you have to ask yourself, if this is happening on the downside, who's picking up the slack? U.S. federal government. So this is the amount of money that since 2007, the annual rate of borrowing of the U.S. government is up to $1.4 trillion on an annualized basis. So this all has to be in balance, right? You don't have delevering on one side and nothing there to pick it up. So this is quantitative easing. It's a response to a balance sheet recession. We're getting an appropriate response to it right now. So we follow all of these things for their trend. Again, looking for the 6 to 24 month trend as it applies to investments. But we're also looking here to see, is this really bad getting worse or evening out? So this just shows those same graphs but takes it from 2004 to today. And this is what I'm liking more. And that is we're not seeing as much of a trend downwards in the delevering. It's balancing out more. So it's flattening out. Which means that the economy may look like it's here, that it's going to start, or consumers and corporations are going to start increasing the amount of debt they're taking on. But this, in a balance sheet recession environment, does not happen fast. We know that. So where are we in the business cycle today? If you look at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they would put industrial production in the U.S. on an upswing. So this is as of August 30th. And it is. We're getting an increase in industrial production. But don't let this surprise you. Remember those slides that showed the squiggles? That's more what we're likely to see. In fact, if we looked at consumer sentiment as the OECD measures it, it's kind of over here on the downswing. So there are alternate ways of looking at what's going on. So in summary, we looked at the macroeconomic perspective, we looked at some capital markets insights, some relevance to your investments. If we look at fixed income, we looked at equities, but I still haven't answered the question, is this a sustainable recovery? And the answer to that is, and remember I am an economist, is maybe. And that's not to waffle. I'm saying that partially facetiously. But we have to look at the uncertainty today in both markets and the financial system and be honest. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Remember that LIBOR-OIS spread chart I showed? The shock that Greece provided to global credit markets. That's the kind of thing that we're going through right now. There's uncertainty about whether or not quantitative easing will work, whether it will cause inflation that can't be controlled. So what we'll continue to look at, both for individual portfolios, and we work with your advisors on that, but also looking at our managers. We need to talk to them and understand how they're managing those portfolios, the funds and the pool portfolios that we've given to them to manage, to see whether or not they're looking at these things in the way that we are, and also to get information from them. They have different sources. So we work with them almost in partnership to try and understand more about what's going on in the economy and in the capital markets. So, as we've got in your papers, there's some great compliance reading there for you. If you want to take the time to read it, that's great. But with that, I'll thank you, and we'll go to questions and answers. You've been very patient. You put up with 3 geek slides. That's great. You've been very indulgent of me tonight. And I hope, if nothing else, I've given you some insight into how to look at the headlines and look behind it, to look for clues about what's going on and how you might be able to apply that to your portfolios. But you're going to hear this message from me every time I talk. Use your advisor. Your advisor is the one who can connect the dots for you between what you're doing individually and what's going on at the macroeconomic level. We're doing the research there. We're passing that on to the advisors. They can help connect those dots for us. So thank you very much.